podcasting has been seeming a little fake lately to me, isn't it? Because that's not why I started. The reason for me to start podcasting was to bring out candid conversations with the side thinkers that I interact with, that raw form of learning from an expert hits different. But during the process to produce better content, I started having two mics, three cameras, lighting on my face, which probably makes the guest a little uncomfortable as well. So I decided that for the next few videos, next few podcasts, I would make it as candid, as raw as possible, without any lighting, without proper mics, without three cameras, and of course, better research. Bring to you the raw form of conversations and interactions with such strategic thinkers. And today we have a very top notch strategic thinker on the subject of China. We have Professor Srikanth Kondapalli, one of the most authorities in India on the subject of China. And we speak about the technological gap that India has with China and how we can leap forward. And he also suggested that quantum technology is a way to leap forward in the race of technological advancement. Do let me know how you find these raw interactions, these candid conversations, and would love your feedback. Without further ado, let's hear more on this from Professor Srikanth Kondapalli. Enjoy.
He is here.
Who's here?
Jaishankar. The first row.
And where's Pannu?
Pannu, no idea.
I
But
thought
he
you
was
were-
invited.
I thought you were talking about the differences of seating. How far is Pannu seated in regard to?
No, that is not clear,
Jaishankar.
but he was given an invite
Acha.
for the attending this inaugural. And three rows behind is Japanese foreign minister.
Chinese premier didn't come.
Chinese vice president is there, but he is not. Maybe it's not clear from this photograph.
So there are a lot of changes now when it comes to China for the US because they want to impose a lot of tariffs. It was so funny. He said the three best words in the world is tariff, there is religion, and this belief, something like that. He said.
Yeah, well, he said tariffs is a very beautiful word. And his emphasis is on tariffs. Basically, tariffs would mean you're putting a tax on any goods that is coming from outside. Essentially, that would increase the price of the product other countries are selling to the United States. Now, people say that, economists say that this increases the consumer's price because it is sold at a higher rate. And this leads to inflation. This leads to the cost of the product higher for the consumer. So it will be uncomfortable for them for buying.
But does Trump understand that tariff is imposed on companies and not government? The way he speaks, he's like, we'll impose tariffs on China. That's what he says.
Yeah,
100% tariff.
So in the case of China, there is no difference between government and Communist Party and the private enterprise.
Fair.
Here you have Ambanis, Adanis, Birlas, Tatas. They are private. They have some work with the government, so they lobby and probably pay something for these political parties for election campaign expenses or whatever. It's not clear, but that is one way of. But they remain purely private and run on family businesses. or corporate, the stock related. Um, so in India or in US or in other where private economy is quite strong, and individual freedom is restored in the constitution, and the private property is instituted, then you have these private sector acting in such a way that they are independent regardless of what the government does, barring some taxation, barring some overall macroeconomic policy. um, they don't interfere in the private companies' affairs. So as a result, you see that there is a difference between government and private sector in our
Elsewhere,
society. Like
elsewhere, but China, it's
in China, the private companies do exist
hmm.
because the constitution has provided some guarantees for them. However, these private enterprises, these are run by party members. The Alibaba said the Chinese banking system is not suitable to the current conditions for lending finance. Generally, banks have to give money for the private enterprises or even state owned enterprises so that they can make allocations and also for future operations so that they have a roadmap for making profits essentially. So he said the current Chinese banking system is not so good. It is not lending based on market principles, but purely giving it to the state-owned enterprises. Once he made that statement, the hell was let loose on him, and he ran away from China. He's now living in Japan.
Yeah,
First, he ran
for a
away
long time,
to,
for like 3 years now.
yeah, almost. He first was in Thailand and then now shifted to Japan. Of course, he retired from Alibaba, but he's the founding. It's like saying Ambanis have retired from.
So he's not the CEO anymore.
He's not the CEO. There was another person who was made CEO, but he was the founder of this. So
Yeah,
obviously, and he
but
has majority stakes
okay,
anyway.
that's the important part. Sir, today's meeting, the reason I wanted to meet you was because I wanted to discuss Kalam and Kavach, and even in Kalam and Kavach, China is everywhere. So the topic of China is most crucial. If I were to tell you what Kalam and Kavach is about, this year it's about, we can see China rising as a superpower. And when a superpower rises, the tremors are felt everywhere in the neighborhood mostly. And India is too big of a country to not feel the tremors, especially because we are growing simultaneously as well. So this year's Kalam and Kavach wants to discuss about the deterrence that we need to create against the adversaries or our threats, which is China, because of its growing nature. Now, Rajnath Singh, our RM, recently spoke about the year of reforms in defense ecosystem, and that is what the focus is here. So when we talk about year of reforms, there are 9 reforms that he had mentioned, which we have selected 3 to 4. And uh, first is how we can develop our defense capabilities, how we can improve our procurement and acquisition, how we can do more export rather than import, and fourth, of course, is technology. Now, where I was really keen on bringing you in the technology part. I have some people who will be discussing technology. For example, General Rakesh Kapoor, who is the deputy chief in the Indian Army right now, and he focuses on ICS. He will be moderating with 4 or 5 different subjects. I would like to bring someone on drone, someone on AI, someone on cyber, someone on space, and one person who understands quantum and who understands our threat, China, that what they are doing and that needs to be done. And I have no one better to explain that because it comes to China's understanding and technology than you. So I would like you to be a part of that, sir. So
Thank
this
you.
is what we're gonna have you speak on that. 4th of April is the date. Manisha Center. We have good collaborators. We got Senjos now as someone who's getting it. But now, if we were to speak about what China did right in terms of technology and how far are we, because I also understand that out of the 55 critical technologies, by the year 2005, China was only leading in 5 of them or less. Now, China is leading in 50 of the 55 uh, critical technologies ahead of the US. So, what have they done right? First, if you could tell me that, sir.
I think in 1978, when they launched the reform program, they called it as four modernizations: agriculture, industry, science and technology, and defense.
Agriculture,
Industry,
industry, science and
science and
technology,
technology, and defense.
and defense.
So,
Acha.
defense was the last choice.
It was the last choice.
Last choice.
Acha.
And science and technology is the last but one. So, they focused on agriculture and industry. Now, agriculture didn't really perform spectacularly in the 5 decades of reform, 4 decades of reform, and but industry substantially improvised. So what did they do was, number one, they sent thousands of Chinese students to go abroad and register in technology related institutions, and they have a 1,000 grains project, 1,000 grains. So you pick up these grains and they will be brought back to China and do the reverse brain drain. And so there is an effort to bring in the talent from abroad, which they have lost. So this is one. Second, they introduce special economic zones, joint venture companies. So as a result, they have now 77,000 American companies in China.
77,000 American. Because that was the American push, wasn't it, sir?
It's true, but whatever it is, the Chinese were able to bring in the American companies into China. There are 83,000 Japanese companies.
This was which year? When did they allow
Since
the
1980s.
capitalistic model in
Since 1980s.
1980s?
More intensified in 1992. That was the time when Deng Xiaoping went to Shenzhen and Zhuhai. It's called the Southern Tour.
It's like the Chinese Silicon Valley, no? Shenzhen?
It has now become Silicon Valley, like Silicon Valley. So it was a special economic zone, dedicated to a special economic zone. So which basically means they would do only exports. They
would do
are
only
not
exports.
involved in any domestic related reforms, but it is about all these joint venture companies in these special economic zones will be only meant for exports.
But is this kind of thought process sustainable? Because if you're not looking inwards, you're only looking outwards, then you're not taking care of your people, which is the most important aspect of your country.
Yeah, but the flip side is that today China has become the largest exporting country and high-tech product exporting country.
And reliant also. Countries are reliant on them now.
Yes, so Japan used to be like that, Germany used to be like that. China surpassed both of them in high-tech exports. And China has become largest trading country. So for example, out of $18 trillion of GDP, they have $4 trillion just exports. $4 trillion, which is the total GDP of India. It's just the export component. So they realized, as you said, this is not conducive for their own people, and domestic consumption has to be increased, and they need to import more, especially raw materials, and convert them into finished products and then re-export or consume domestically. So, for example,
Because if sorry to interrupt, sir, if you think about it, the Chinese market itself must be really big because of the population, for one. There's a massive population of people who want to, consume things.
True, but if your per capita income is low, if your savings are very high, you cannot sell your goods to your people.
But did that change after that period of capitalism, which was invited and which was imposed by the US? Did it change internally as well? That people started earning more, people started spending more because of their earnings.
So let me just give a comparative picture. India consumes 59%
Of
of what
its
we produce or what we import. 59% we. Chinese consume only 40%.
okay, and they produce much more also.
They produce more than we produce. We hardly produce. We produce about 18% of our GDP is manufacturing.
Got it.
They used to be 56% of their GDP used to be manufacturing, now reduced to about 42, 43%. Because manufacturing is also highly polluting.
Yeah.
And so they switched off the manufacturing, not switched off, but diverted some of this to service sector. In our case, our service sector is very high. The component of service sector in GDP, it's nearly 60%. Service sector like banking, IT, pharma, all stuff related.
Sir, I want to talk more about the defense sector because that is what Kalam and Kavach will be focusing on.
Yeah.
Defense, why was it the last? Because then last time I spoke to you and you said then China's fundamental ideology is in terms of being an expansionist. So that is more important. And how do you become an expansionist? By having a strong military to impose that expansion. So why was military their last domain to work on?
They realized that the Soviet Union was spending a lot for the defense sector. And sometimes even the Chinese have spent a lot on defense sector, like North Koreans. 40 to 50% of their GDP was going to defense in Soviet Union.
40 to 50%.
50% during times
now,
of crisis.
And now it is how much for Russia?
For Russia, during Ukraine that has increased, but pre-Ukraine conflict it is not so much.
4 or 5%.
Yeah, even more. But I was mentioning Soviet Union. Soviet Union had a military-industrial complex. Everything was related to the defense sector. So they compromised on the consumer market and they focused on defense industries. As a result, the Chinese Communist Party assessment is that the Soviets have not satisfied their people with consumer durables and others. So one of the lessons of the Soviet disintegration is you produce more for the consumer market. So their emphasis was on agriculture and industry.
So they learned from Soviet Union and that's why they made defense the last point. Got it.
Second is if your civilian economy improves, then you can transfer some of that wealth into defense sector. If you focus on defense industry and compromise on consumer, civilian consumer market, then you go the Soviet way. So they decided
the Soviet way is the way of power and influence.
Soviet model is based on high bureaucracy, military industrial complex, and people are not connected. So there is a lot of discontent among the people, and that overthrew the system.
But we see in China also now.
Used to be before the reforms, and after reforms, of course the bureaucratic structure became also very powerful, very rich. But people also became rich because they participated in agriculture industry. So prosperity has been diffused into the society. As a result, we have so much of GDP generated by industry and agriculture, and of course science and technology. Defense did not create wealth, but it created the security structures for the party state. So now they are also exporting. They export 5 to 6 billion dollars a year, and fourth largest exporter in defense products. After US, Russia, France, and other countries, they are the fourth or fifth largest
Defense exporter.
defense exporter.
And what? Okay, we'll get into that later. Go on, sir.
So agriculture was important because majority of people were still dependent on agriculture. If they are not satisfied, again, the Communist Party assessment is that you will have a Soviet kind of outcome. So agriculture they improved. In fact, today the Chinese have more productivity than India in agriculture. Um, China produces something like 600 million tons of food grains. We produce about 280, 300. So more than double of our production. China has 9.6 million square kilometers of land, out of which only 29-30% is cultivable. That's about 3 million roughly. We have 3.2 million square kilometers of land, and 2/3 is cultivable. So
Wow.
that's nearly 2 million square kilometers roughly. So roughly it is the same cultivable land that both have. But per acre productivity is higher in China because of fertilizers, because of S&T. When you go in China, travel in China by train or by bus, you see for hundreds of kilometers, you have these greenhouse gases, greenhouse that
Houses,
yeah,
the setups to grow plants better.
that tarpaulin
Yeah.
put up, and so hundreds of kilometers you keep seeing them. One of the things when you travel in China, you find very stark is the thermal power stations, coal fired. Second is this greenhouses. So you need energy, you need agriculture. Anyway, what I was trying to say is that their per capita productivity is higher than India because of S&T. I mean, all the new
Because their
technological
policies are
developments.
like that for them. They have to listen to the government, right? That's quite imposed there.
Yeah, whatever be the case, their productivity has increased.
But defense, when was the reform for defense there?
So I just want to finish this. So agriculture, if you have surplus, this surplus is put up in industry. Industry developed.
Okay.
Industry became the main focus, as I was mentioning.
They exported more.
56% of the GDP was manufacturing. After industrial revolution, many countries began focusing on industry. And whichever society which focused on industry became materially capable, and high standards of economic living, etc., is reflected in those societies. One of the barometers is steel production. How much steel have you produced? Since industrial revolution, the only one main category of looking at your economic growth is how much have you produced steel production. China produced about 830 million tons of steel.
830 million
We
tons.
produce some 200 million tons of steel, 4 times nearly. They surpassed US, they surpassed UK, all European companies put together, steel production. So till about 20th century, how much steel have you produced? That is the barometer for your growth. Industry, so industry, there are several categories, some 13, 14 items. So one of the items is automobiles. So today, China produces some 24 million units a year. US produces some 15 million. We produce some 6 or 7 million units, automobile units. So this is another category.
So that transfer to the industrial revolution.
Yes. So part of the industrial revolution is, so this is civilian industry. Now, what China did was to focus on dual use industries. So this created a base for the defense industry.
Okay. Because
For example, they have this defense conversion. So they had these Soviet origin defense industries, ordnance factories, aircraft manufacturing, shipyard
shipyard.
manufacturing,
Hmm.
missile manufacturing, whatever, all those defense industries. They converted these into civilian as part of the industrial, reforms.
So these are private sector or
All,
PSUs?
as I say, there is nothing like private and public in China. These are all party dominated.
Okay.
So let us not look at from that prism
Hmm.
that these are separate from the government or party. All of them are linked. You want to survive in China, you have to be a party member. So
Like oligarchs. Would you call them oligarchs, sir?
no, in the case of China, these are all kind of dispersed, and there is the internal competition that was introduced. Unlike in generally state, the oligarchs or PSUs, there is no competition, but they deliberately introduce competition among these, and so people are bubbling with new ideas, new products. So the defense conversion was these old factories were converted into producing now Suzuki cars
Suzuki cars.
or Volkswagen cars, and modernize the ordnance factories or aircraft factories or shipyards. Now, I was mentioning about these thousands of students sent abroad. So they were sent to Japan, Korea, Taiwan, where ship industry, Netherlands,
Hmm.
ship industry is very prominent. So they learned all of this, came back home. Today, China produces 60 to 70% of global ships.
Hmm.
Hmm?
That's why they're growing maritime.
Yeah, substantially. Now, the same dual use ships can be converted into military, naval versions. Likewise, they focused on, so they had these tie ups with Boeing, Airbus for
Hmm.
manufacturing, say, pistons or landing gears or whatever. And then they also did R&D into this. They now are flying as civilian airlines.
Hmm.
Hmm? Um, since this is dual use, so basically for an fighter aircraft, what you need is a good airframe, which is light. So with the Russians, they signed an agreement for transfer of technology, license manufacturing of Su-27s
Hmm.
in Shenyang. Now, for this, they have contracted with the Russians on titanium structural elements. Titanium structural elements are very, very light. Unlike the previous steel, aluminum, whatever, and these are quite, um, uh, you know, even if there is a crash, they can sustain
Hmm.
those crashes.
Got it.
So titanium structural elements fixed for the airframe. Second thing that you require for this beast, 70, 80 tons, you need to airlift.
Hmm.
For this, you need thrust, you need an engine. Um, Many countries, technologically advanced countries, have failed in producing an engine, aero engine with thrust. Only 4 countries today manufacture this: US, Russia, Sweden, France. Rolls Royce as well. So there used to be jet engines, now turbofan as well. So these 5 countries have this major. So Pratt and Whitney, GE from the US, General Electric, the Saturn Lulka in Russia, Soviet Union, Russia, for the Su. So they manufacture AL-31F, AL-41 engines. These are with higher thrust.
Mhm.
Snecma from Sweden, and French, I'm forgetting the names, but these are part of the Airbus, and also the one that we bought for the Eurofighter aircraft, the the one that we acquired from the French. So these are the 4 5 major engine producers across the globe. China has not been successful because the Russians have not given them the technology on engines, but they went ahead with the indigenous production. Essentially, for an engine, you have to master the um, metallurgy. You have to fire at 2000 degrees centigrade and convert that into thrust levels and so on. So this is actually a technological nightmare to manufacture a turbojet turbofan engines. China claims that it has produced 60,000 engines, so which basically means they are experimenting.
Hmm.
You'll be surprised to know Japan so far did not produce an engine. All that they did was to copy from the US. All these Toyota cars, all these are all
But the
reverse.
technology was transferred to them.
That's true.
But in
They
case of
themselves
China, how did they get their technology so ahead? I mean, people say that they stole the technology.
beg, borrow, steal.
How do you steal a technology, sir?
Um, well, the I mentioned this 1,000 grains project before.
Hmm.
So these students are working in every other industry uh, abroad. Apprentices, full time, they're all called back, given incentives, and they're now upgrading your own technology.
So through manpower, you steal technology, sir.
Now, much of the US literature on the spying indicates one or two individuals who were transferring these technologies to China. So, China must be working on them in terms of these laboratories where much of this technology is being churned out.
No, even when you steal technology, you still need to make your own out of it. No, you can't just.
Yes, so it takes generally 12 years for reverse engineering. You want to manufacture this, I give you this, and then you want to manufacture it. You take time, 12 years time to manufacture this.
Exactly.
By the time the technology is outdated,
Exactly.
but the thing is, you are manufacturing it now. You are doing the R&D for reverse engineering,
Hmm.
and you are so while the technology is outdated, you still have now individual way of conceiving and producing
Indigenous.
indigenous.
So then now you can go next step after 12 years.
Exactly.
Okay.
So that is what it took for China.
Okay.
uh, Initially they were doing Soviet Union products reverse engineered,
Hmm.
and then the Western, Japanese, Korean, etc. And now there is so much of ecosystem that has developed that they are now manufacturing on their own.
Hmm.
Hmm. Uh, of course, you will have trial and error, like in any technological venture, you will have this. But what I feel is that they learned substantially from the West, and they are now reintroducing that into the Chinese ecosystem all across.
Does India do reverse engineering as well, sir?
None. So, in the case of China, the IPR is a major controversial issue.
Hmm.
European chambers of commerce keeps accusing China of IPR violations, intellectual property rights violation. There is no accusation so far on India
Because we
that
don't do anything. Our bureaucracy is too strong to that any individual would want to do something like that, even in power.
yes. So due to these regulations, and you have a free press, you have a democracy, you have a
Democracy.
rule of law. So it constrains the IPR acquisitions, violations, etc. And WTO founding members, so you'll have to abide by those rules and regulations. So there is less chance for reverse engineering.
Got it. So could you tell me about their Army, Navy, and Air Force, their capabilities of their Army, Navy, and Air Force? Because all three are increasing. We see they are going ahead in the drone technology ahead of the US. They're making the 6th generation jet. For example, they just showed off. I don't know if I have to believe that or not. Then in terms of Navy, maritime, they are getting stronger as well. They're trying to be a regional power right now because they don't have any other, like the US, they can't put themselves in different regions. So they're trying to dominate the Southeast Asian region. And army also, they are the second largest army. So
Yeah.
if you could break down all these three forces, a little bit about them and some critical information about them, so that I can ask you questions based on that.
Yeah. So in these four modernizations, the S&T developed, and then defense industry as a last. And within defense, so they decided that you can't modernize across the board. You have to be selective because it's a huge mammoth organization, defense sector. So they began modernizing the defense, and initially they had hiccups. So they just sold out all these defense industries which are making losses and not able to really
Sold out to
transform.
whom?
So, sold out to the internal and even external.
External.
They, for example, Suzuki bought the ordnance factories which were manufacturing tanks.
Mhm.
And these tanks did not perform in the Gulf War when they supplied these to the Republican forces
Mhm.
of Saddam Hussein. T-69 tanks, T-70 tanks, whatever, all those, they were just shot as rabbits in the Gulf War in 91. So China decided this is of no use, so they privatized these industries. All the aircraft, as I was mentioning, civilian airlines was developed. Shipyards have been revamped, and now new technology and talent has come from abroad. So this was the 1980s, and we are now in 2025 with so much of um, 20, 30 years of experimentation. That what is now you see, China has 340 naval vessels. No country on earth has these many. United States has some 240. India has some 180.
Hmm.
130. And we aspire to become 190 by 2030. So they have the largest number. They have the largest number of shipyards in the world.
How many?
Some 11, 12, but these are big, very big.
But all are controlled by the party.
Of course. There is no institution, no economic unit that is away from the party.
But how do you manage when you have everything under you? How do you manage all these different institutions?
One of the things is, you want to be a party leader, you want to get a promotion, you have to show what did you contribute for economic reform.
Okay, so everything comes down to economics. कि फायदा हो रहा है नहीं हो रहा.
हाँ. You have to show the ledgers.
And how much time do you get to show that?
3 to 4 years.
3 to 4 years.
So you're in a hurry. Xi Jinping himself was a party secretary in Fujian province. And his briefing is, what did you do for reform and opening up policies? So he was considered to be the darling of the Taiwanese businessmen. Because the Taiwanese would ask, I need a flyover here because we are facing traffic jams, etc. He would have this flyover within no time. Prefabricated stuff and would provide. We need these raw materials, we are in short of this. We need electricity, he would provide. That is his CV. If he had increased the profits of the provincial or the city shaman, then his stock would go up and Deng Xiaoping would have recognized him, which he did. So the criteria for you is not that you are occupying a chair. लेकिन आपने क्या किया? So very strict.
It is a little impressive also, sir.
Absolutely.
I've never thought about China in an impressive way. I've always tried to, find problems with them. The kind of, policies that they create. But this mindset and this visionary leadership is impressive if I think about it.
Absolutely, they have to show something substantial for occupying that chair. Hmm?
Hmm.
So this was kind of bubbling all over
In all
the
industries.
all industries, and
When
uh,
did this change come in defense ecosystem?
around 90s.
This also
So
90s. You said
yeah,
90s is when STM and defense was the fourth
80s was the reform, 90s was takeoff
defense.
time, 2000s was concrete manifestation.
Hmm.
You have all of these. Of course, it's a broad brush of such changes. You can't make it. So they would create two industries and let them compete, which is doing the best in terms of production, management, marketing,
Mhm.
export. So
I think where they won was, sir, that they focus on dual use. That they thought whatever we create, we would make it for the government and also to export it, for
yes,
example.
even the arms which they were producing, they were straight away exporting these. In 1987, 86, they sold IRBMs to Saudi Arabia.
Hmm.
These are called silkworm missiles, IRBMs, intermediate range.
Yeah,
Now,
yeah.
Saudi Arabia is a military ally of the United States,
Hmm.
and Soviet Union still exists at the time. But Chinese took a very bold decision because they needed hard currency.
Hmm.
They just sold it to Soviet Union, and these are manned by the Pakistani technicians and Pakistani whatever, all those scientists, etc. So so they needed money and they went berserk, selling to everybody. Iraq was fighting against Iran, so Chinese sold arms to Iraq and Iran, both, like Western countries do.
Hmm.
The French, for example, used to supply Scorpion submarine technology to Pakistan. They also gave the same thing to India. Let Indians and Pakistanis keep fighting. That's the European logic since the Brits times, divide and rule, and whatever. So China is following the same pattern, supplying to the rivals within the same area, and making money.
But how do they accept? How? Why will a rival accept your product?
Because you're in war, you're desperate. Russians today are accepting North Korean supplies,
They
Iranian
are
supplies,
allies. North Korean is an ally.
Iran, from Iran. They are
Iran is
getting
also
it
an
from.
ally.
True, but then in a war, you go helter skelter to get
True.
everything
True. You want everything that you can
that you
possibly get.
can. Yeah, scoring through every other market, gray market, black market, you know, white market,
Hmm.
all stuff. So the Chinese saw this as an opportunity, and keep selling, and that's how they became fourth largest. So when you mentioned we are also doing reforms to export, this is the model that one is looking at. So much of these industries, defense industries, now are competing on market principles. Market here means don't ask for subsidies. Don't ask for the parent organization to provide you with finance for doing this. You raise finance from your sources, rather than asking the government to pay for. Now, Indian model is you still keep asking the government for money. Hmm? We have not involved the private sector so far in our defense industries, and except for a few L&T, others which have come into the picture now. Otherwise, we were basically, defense would mean all government sectors, no private participation. In the case of China, they were asked to raise money, bring in collaboration with the foreign ventures, and raise capital through whatever means. So Tang Xiaoping had this slogan, red cat or white cat, as long as it catches the mice, which means you do anything, but show me the ledgers that you made profits.
Hmm. Got it. So, sir, agar we want to talk about how far India is in terms of defense ecosystem when it comes to China. How
Um,
far would you say we are, and what do we need to do? We'll cover that part later. First, tell us how far are we?
I'm actually blank on India.
Mm-hmm.
I have no expertise on India, so I'm ignorant of many of the developments. My focus has been on China, so
Got it.
it's but some preliminary uh, immature remarks probably
Mm-hmm.
because we keep reading newspapers and that's how you get across. But I don't have expertise on this subject, so these are just preliminary
Yeah,
remarks.
no worries, sir.
Um, since British times, we had these ordnance factories and others. Uh, and these are basically social welfare related. How many employees do you have? Whether they are getting salaries, whether there is the constitutional provisions related to reservations in jobs, where in all the social welfare related. That was the primary criteria during Krishna Menon's time in 50s. And Nehru followed overall these policies. So essentially, it is not combat driven.
Hmm.
These are social welfare driven during Nehru's time. Indira Gandhi continued, but we required a lot of arms, so we started importing substantially.
A
Even
lot.
Nehru had signed an agreement with Kennedy for import of arms when we faced the flak from the Chinese in 1962.
So we never focused on our own indigenized product. We always imported from the beginning of post-independence.
We have indigenous production, but indigenous production was not efficient and compatible with the changing dynamics of war.
International standards and technological advancement.
Yes.
Okay.
So, other than with the only one exception of ISRO and DRDO. ISRO, of course, is civilian, nothing to do with defense, but again, dual use.
But still, space is an important part of warfare now.
True, but we haven't used ISRO for military purposes. Dual use, yes. There is some sectors where you can have, for example, ASAT, anti-satellite is
Hmm.
dual use, but we never experimented that. We never used this as a combat theory, part of the combat. It may emerge in future, but as of now.
Yeah, true.
But DRDO was precision technologies were used. We were never able to develop an engine, but we were able to send these missiles, BMD system, nuclear weapons, all sorts of things. That is because even during British time, we have had nuclear power plants. So there is an ecosystem that is developing gradually in terms of nuclear cycle, how to master the nuclear cycle. And we explored it in 72 and in 98. So we had the know-how, but we didn't had the political will to develop this. It came up in 98 and then we now are moving in. The irony is DRDO could not develop an engine for the LCA, Tejas. We are still dependent on General Electric for these engines transfer.
Hmm.
So it also indicates if Israel cannot develop an aero engine, if the Japanese could not develop an aero engine, how come Indians develop an aero engine? So that's the kind of basically it is high tech beyond our comprehension given the kind of R&D spending that we do, which is
That's
very
bare
less,
minimum.
2 to 3%.
That's way less than what China does. So.
Exactly. Um, so so ours so barring DRDO and nuclear ballistic missile technologies, we have not been able to develop the other in a mass scale. I mean, some project we have had on, say, DRDO developing high altitude uniforms for the ITBP and the army in Siachen. So these are exceptions. What I was trying to say is on a mass scale, global production for the globe, for the needs of the, we have not done that.
Sir, we export about $20 million, and we hope to export 50 million dollars in the next few years. 20 or 20 is the right number? Yeah, 20 million is what we export. But what we are exporting is not the critical infrastructure. We export tools and things which are not very essential, even though in terms of they must be important, but they are not critical, is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah. So we are not exporting, for example, tanks, armored personnel carriers, ships, aircraft, fighter aircraft. There is speculation that Tejas will be bought by the Indonesians or Malaysians, but we have not been able to, even ourselves, we are not, the Indian Air Force was not satisfied with the progress that we made on Tejas so far. So you're right that in terms of critical mass, we are not there yet. Hmm? I was just giving you a figure of $5 billion of the Chinese exports. You're mentioning $20 million
Hmm.
and $5 billion. So that's a difference. And Americans 20 billion, 30 billion. So we are nowhere near these figures in critical mass infrastructure. Okay, so our shipyards were part of the Cold War construct, and shipyards were kind of outdated. More trade unionism than compared with the commercial. George Fernandez once 74 or 75. He organized a Bombay that railway and shipyard strike. It just the Indian economy almost collapsed with that strike. So it was more of trade union. It was more of rights. What rights do I have under the Constitution than what is my duty towards my nation? So these two things, the priority for Indian politicians was we have a right from this cake. How do we eat this cake rather than produce the cake? So that was the ethos that we have had till roughly about 2000s. Now we are waking up. We are saying, no, that is not the question that we need to raise. Have we produced enough for our own people? Have you produced for the global market? Mass production, have we done or not? So these are questions that are being asked, and we are now addressing these by catering for the global market. Ordnance factories are now getting changed. Aircraft factories, we only have one HAL, I mean, the big one. Now we are producing, say, civilian aircraft, civilian helicopters for tourism purposes and other things.
But we still export a lot, sir. Why do we export so much? We had so many orders. What we do is we do emergency procurement. For example, right now this year itself, we gave 1.5 lakh crore worth of order to France for their different planes, and then for the maritime as well. But what do you think, as someone who not very keen on reading on it, but you still read about it and hear about it? Why do we export so much?
I think one is demand. There is demand.
Exactly. If there's demand, why can't we produce it ourselves?
Now it is easier to produce some components, some nuts and bolts. You're doing it. There is demand for this because this is labor intensive. This is the other guy has no interest in producing. Other company has no interest in producing. So we create a niche area in this, and so we start producing. So demand supply, basically, wherever there is a demand, the supplies are generated. market economy. Your specializations, your core competencies are brought in. Why can't we manufacture the whole product instead of just these nuts and bolts? That will also come once you have mastered the whole product. Then it will also come.
That's because we've seen in today's warfare has changed. We were thinking that it's going to be quick war now, but we have been seeing Russia Ukraine in 1,000 days. So all the preconceived notions about warfare has been disputed. For example, the reason we need to be self-reliant is that we, at the time of a conflict, we're not relying on someone like Russia or Germany or France to provide us for critical infrastructure, for example.
Yeah, well, during Kargil, we ran out of ammunition for our Bofors gun. And it is said that the Americans, because of their close partnership with Pakistan, were not allowing South Africa, which used to produce these products, ammunition, spare parts, and others. So they pressurized South Africa not to provide us with the spare parts for the Bofors gun or other guns and so on. So we suffered because of this external dependence during that time. So we are making our own ammunition, etc. And I must say here, China has actually much more depth in self-reliance than India. We are self-reliant in the nuclear, ballistic missile, and other areas. But China is holistically preparing. For example, their R&D expenditure is nearly 24%, 24 to 28%. Ours is 4%. This is on capital expenditure, meaning the platforms that we are buying, so on and so forth. So basically, in terms of a war, in terms of war preparation, they are much more agile than we are because of this indigenization. And once you have done the indigenization and the ecosystem is developed, you're now confident of supplying abroad. And today, so if they indeed develop the 6th generation aircraft, they would start exporting all these for the highest bidder. It could be Pakistan, it could be Bangladesh, it could be some African countries, some South
Turkey.
American country. Turkey is more advanced than the Chinese on this sector because Turkey sent a lot of students to MIT. And Bayraktar, the drone, is by Professor Bayraktar. He went to MIT and he learned all this, went back to Turkey, developed this. This is one of the best drones in the world.
So then the biggest problem is this: we send our scholars to the US only to be settled there.
Yeah.
But all the countries that are being like success stories, such as China, Turkey, you mentioned, the only reason they have succeeded is because the people, the human resource, have come back to serve their nation.
Yeah. So it also depends on the leadership. Our leaderships have not been very keen on getting this brain drain reversed, but they have done. They have provided incentive. We had the dot-com bust. Many techies were coming back to India, but they saw the infrastructure. They said, no, we cannot stay here. Many of them left, went back to the United States. They sold all their properties, came back, and then settled down here, bought properties, and sold all these properties and went back. I mean, this is our leadership was
It's
not
the
very
mindset,
proactive.
I think, so also the people, and it comes with time. Sir, if you were to pick on one critical technology that will change the future, of course, you might say AI, but if that would be in terms of defense ecosystem, which technology is most crucial in the next 10 years?
I think the basic thing here is supercomputers.
Quantum?
Quantum.
Why? What would quantum do that we can't do at the moment, and in defense mainly? Let's just talk about defense right now, because I know every different sector has different permutations. But for defense, you said computing power, which is going to come through quantum, will be the key driving force.
Because everything is based on data, and data can be now disrupted and acquired through surreptitious means. Quantum doesn't allow for that. Quantum technologies.
I'm sorry to hold you. Can you please explain me quantum? What is quantum?
Quantum is basically a huge jump in the flow of data, number one. Number two, uninterrupted. Most of the convention, you must be aware of phishing, hacking, interference, disruption of flow of the data that we are generally now seeing in all our systems, hacking, etc. Quantum doesn't allow for this. You cannot interfere with the data flow. So these are through satellite, through cable networks, through whatever. So quantum secure data supply.
Quantum secure data supply.
Data processing, data flow.
Okay. And AI is also data, but that doesn't secure, but it's...
Yeah, no, AI would provide you with several options of how you use this data for what purposes and at larger speeds. Quantum also is larger speed, quantum jump in terms of the data flow. The main difference here is it is secure. Quantum is
What
secure.
is the purpose of quantum technology?
Secure, security.
Security.
Yeah.
That's the essential of...
Yeah. And quick flow. If you are able to transfer 100 Mbps in so and so time, there will be a quantum jump in transfer of this data.
Okay. As easy as that. Just speeding up the process of anything in terms of technology.
This is really quantum.
Got it. Got it.
I just read a report in China when they transfer from north to south, Beijing to Guangzhou.
But there has to be a fundamental technology attached to it. How does this transfer happen?
This is quantum computing. This is
just a supercomputer.
No, this is a different technology altogether. Quantum is a different technology altogether. The previous conventional data transfers, this is what we have seen in 20th century and early part of 21st. So what everybody is experimenting now is in the critical technologies is the quantum computing, cloud, quantum cloud, quantum satellites, where so they beam this data to a particular from point A to point B. If 386, I'm not sure whether you heard about this 386.
No, I haven't, sir.
When in 91, 92, when we began the computers, we had 386.
Okay.
And then it jumped to 486. From then to Pentium 1, Pentium 2, Pentium 3. So we used to type. You just type, so that is 1 byte. And by the time it comes onto the monitor, it takes about few seconds.
Got it.
That's the speed that we went through. But this is better than the typewriter we are used to till that time. So we would go and press the keyboard and it would appear on the monitor at its own pace. So we would wait for the bytes that we have, the keyboard, whatever we pressed, to come up onto the monitor. And the monitor used to be like a dinosaur, quite big.
A massive one.
Massive one. So there is a quantum from 386 to 486, 486 to Pentium 1, Pentium 2, Pentium 3. Now that you have seen what we have. So we used to have this big floppy disks and then now flash drives. So this is conventional.
Okay.
Quantum is So point A to point B, the data flow is several thousand times.
So you said quantum is the most important technology that India must focus on.
Yes, indeed, because of the kind of data transfers that it can provide and data security, because these are non interfering and beyond the scope of any hacking and other hanky panky stuff. So, India, as part of the Quad, so one of the number one items in the Quad is critical technologies, including quantum and 5G telecom and 6G telecom, whenever that materializes. So, in these two areas, quantum is being emphasized, and we have now a lot of fellowships, scholarships for Indians, Japanese, Australians to study in the US in quantum technologies.
Got it.
Uh,
Like a joint
so,
joint collaboration, basically.
indeed.
Mhm.
So, because quantum technologies have not yet developed fully, and everybody is experimenting with this, so there is a now an opportunity for
India.
joint
No,
effort.
so would you say whoever masters quantum can become a superpower?
It is one of the ways, one of the means, because everything is data,
Hmm.
data protection, data security. So yeah, that's the next step. If 19th century till about 19th century, from industrial revolution, if it is steel, that was the currency of power and energy. Later on in 20th century, who controlled energy resources. Now it is data.
Hmm.
Whoever controls data controls power,
Hmm.
global power.
That's true. So that's what geopolitics is about. It's about influence and power. And do you think US can sustain that power amidst China's rise?
Yes, the Chinese have their own programs now. As I was mentioning, China launched a satellite called Sirius,
Hmm.
and this is dedicated for quantum computing and quantum technologies. So they have already launched this satellite and making experiments in quantum field. It is likely that in our next decade, the Chinese would compete extensively with the United States. So US is concerned about this dispersion of technologies and loss of leadership over these issues.
Got it. So you were saying that the country are still racing towards quantum, and but we can now see AI as well. Do you think AI can help us achieve quantum?
AI can give you options regarding the data that you feed in, and quantum can increase the data supply. So, two different functions here.
No, what I mean is for the R&D purposes of quantum. Do you think we can leverage artificial intelligence, machine
Yes,
learning?
sir, of course we can.
Why
It will
aren't we doing
provide,
it then?
because even AI is in the baby steps
Hmm.
at this moment. So,
That's the reason.
and now you'll have to really increase the nanometer strength. Um, Previously, it is 24 nanometer, reduced to 16, 17, and a Japanese firm contracted with TSMC in Taiwan for 2 nanometer.
2 nanometer. Is it already in production?
They just signed last year and probably will produce in about 2 to 3 years' time.
Hmm.
On the other hand, we are still
Where is US in this semiconductor race? So?
um, they are behind the Taiwanese
Okay.
on nanometer related. So nanometer will provide you with the kind of data that you can store in those.
Hmm.
So this is technological upgradation that is required.
So, sir, the our beginning of a conversation, I told you that we need deterrence for the threats such as China. Do you think that's the right approach? That's why we should modernize our defense forces. Is that the only reason, or is there any other reason as well?
We have a fundamental problem with China, which is sovereignty and territorial integrity issues. The dispute has not been resolved. Territorial dispute has not been resolved. Second, we have the Indian Ocean, which is not a territorial dispute, but it is an issue of leadership.
And trade
in which
routes.
China has been deploying its vessels. Third, broadly, there is a power transition between US and China. In that scenario, we get marginalized. In the tussle between US and China, we get marginalized. India gets marginalized. So we need to prepare for these contingencies, which means basically deterrence.
Right. That it should be our aim to deter.
That should be our aim.
Right.
Because wars have become costly, the actual war has become costly and unpredictable. The only way we can get out of this is deterrence.
From power, if we are more powerful.
Yeah.
Right.
So the other side will think twice before fiddling with India. You have so much of power at your disposal, conventional and strategic, that the adversary thinks twice before initiating any conflict.
Sir,
So
lovely understanding these points. Just 2 points from you, sir. 2 quick ones. One is, if you were to, out of everything that we spoke about, we mostly spoke about China's rise and India's falling behind in terms of technological advancement, in terms of defense mainly. If there was a controversial opinion from Professor Kondapalli on this subject, what would that be?
Controversial, well, we have had several cyber attacks on India originating from China. Quite substantial number of cyber attacks. So if India keeps its house in order and enhances the cyber capability to deter the kind of intrusions that have happened in our system, I think that is the most important contribution that India can make, because we are losing in the civilian sphere as well as in the security sphere in the cyber domain. Civilian in the sense of so much of phishing and the general civilian businesses are getting targeted, and we keep seeing about ATMs being attacked, all sorts of things. So what India could do is to enhance these capabilities.
India
it's not controversial, but it is kind of defensive.
So India must enhance its cyber security, is what you said in a nutshell. Wow. It's a pleasure speaking with you. This has been a new approach for me to interview strategic thinkers like yourself, because I would like to make such conversations which is so candid with you and just trying to get more from your strategic brain for the people who want to get connected to you. So this was an approach. I hope you enjoyed this. I would just want you to tell the audience to subscribe in your way, whichever way you want to.
Thank you very much for the invite, and I think it is a very good conversation that you had. Please spread the message, and for the listeners, please subscribe to this channel. There are veritable programs that Mr. Shiva Maria has been bringing out periodically. There is so much of color, there is so much of discussion, different topics, civil, military, security, culture, and across the spectrum debates that he had been able to conduct. So quite rich in content. Please subscribe to this channel.
Thank you for your kind words, sir. Pleasure talking to you like always. And I'm sure the audience enjoyed it. If you enjoyed the episode, make sure to like, share, and subscribe. Until then, keep reimagining yourself and know that the power of change lies within you. Jai Hind.